Rory Stewart.
Oh, thank you, sir. Madam Deputy Speaker, very much. Very briefly, I wanted to touch on the issue of specifically the elderly. There's been a huge focus in response to the budget on the needs, obviously, of the next generation, younger people, and in particular, representing a constituency in Cumbria where we deal with serious issues of isolation, just to make three rapid points. The first is to bear in mind the enormous contribution of older people in our country. All of us, from any side of the House, experience the fact that essentially people aged over 55 are probably the most vigorous, most active citizens in our communities. Many of the things that happen day in, day out, for us as constituency MPs involve people aged over 55 challenging our decisions, holding us to account, being highly articulate, leading community projects, whether it goes from digging in superfast broadband to working out how to support the hospice at home movement, the elderly are making an enormous contribution. But the reality is, of course, that the elderly in this country are suffering a real problem. We have developed a culture which is increasingly focused on the young, on the idea of youth, on the idea of productivity, on the idea of the next generation. We are finding it more and more difficult in the media or in this House to talk properly about the elderly. And in my experience, as I suspect will be the experience of many people in the House, it is in particular the elderly who represent the most shocking scandal in our society, which is day after day, walking into the homes of the elderly, we are seeing scenes of loneliness, of isolation, of deprivation, which can be genuinely shocking. And we do have ways of addressing this. The government's reforms on pension are a very good step in that direction. It's very good to see, for example, Age UK praising the government's reforms in pensions. But there's much more that we can do to be more ingenious. To take one example, very concrete example of a scandal in our society, is deafness. We pride ourselves all the time on huge technological changes. We pride ourselves on being able to produce a new laptop every year, increasing developments in miniaturization, and yet hearing aid technology is still basically stuck in the 1970s. And yet, deafness is a terrible thing. Anybody who lives with a deaf person can see that it removes the complexity in conversation, it removes the human relationship, it creates deep isolation, and yet we are not investing in developing the technology in the way we could. Secondly, telehealth. We're spending over £1 billion on superfast broadband, but the NHS has not yet grasped the potential in telehealth and telemedicine. If we want elderly people to remain at home, we need to find a way of addressing them directly. I had a very depressing conversation with a GP surgery recently when they said to me that they didn't feel any need to use superfast broadband connections because they were just coming to terms with the huge benefits of talking to people on the telephone. Right? Thirdly, we need to think about how we can use community hospitals in a much more flexible and imaginative way in order to support what the Honourable Member spoke about, which is social enterprises in the third sector getting into people's homes. The biggest killer amongst elderly people in this country at the moment is, of course, loneliness. Your chance of dying doubles within a year of your partner's death. And we can all understand how that happens in very concrete terms. Your partner dies, suddenly you no longer get a prescription for a new set of glasses. Your partner dies, perhaps your medication isn't being looked at, perhaps the stair carpet isn't being nailed down, perhaps you're not being taken into the supermarket to buy food. These are all things that the third sector can help to deal with. These are all things that community hospitals, imaginatively managed, can deal with. So to conclude, because I'm very, very aware that we're so short of time, if our nation is looking for a mission for the next 20 or 30 years, we need to come to terms with the elderly. All of us understand the statistics. The statistics are easy. The number of people aged over 85 is going to double. The number of people aged over 65 is going to go up by 2 million between now and 2025. the number of people with Alzheimer's and dementia will double. Every single one of us will experience in our families and our homes the terrible pressures of aging. Coming from Afghanistan, where every young Afghan man, men in stonewashed jeans with the latest mobile telephones, will show enormous respect to the elderly, will cross the road to show their appreciation and support for the elderly, it is very worrying that in this country, where the elderly are contributing so much in terms of citizenship, wisdom, advice, support, where every one of us, day by day, seeing our parents, our grandparents, or indeed our friends going through the terrible process of deafness, of forgetfulness, or ultimately dementia, we need, as a government and as a society, to build a society which is not just fit for our children, but is also fit for our parents.